Collecting data for analysis is an arduous and lonely endeavor. There is no person to provide oversight, no one to keep me on track. To specifically define what Motivational Shocks does, it is critical to define what Motivational Shocks does not do. To arrive at a clear understanding of this separation was akin to navigating with no compass, no map, and no view of the horizon. Welcome to part 1 of a video series where I'll be revisiting the boosters I covered shortly after release. I will also be covering boosters that have been added to the roster since then. This video is broken into 3 parts: terrain and conditions, hazards, and combat effects. And I'm using 3 different boosters: muscle enhancement, motivational shocks, and vitality enhancement. I have read and was under the belief that muscle enhancement would increase my speed on hill traversal. It does not. It also does not help with vaulting or climbing over objects. But what about those big hills that you can't summit? Well, muscle enhancement doesn't help you there either. There are a couple of times in the muscle enhancement video, the one on the right, where I recover from a downhill slide a little faster than the video on the left, and vice versa. In all, this accounts for a faster time for the entirety of this run by 3/4 of a second for muscle enhancement. If you watch the terrain passing by in both videos, you will see that this is the exact same line. Muscle enhancement provides 0 benefit when running on sand. Okay, Cash, what if Motivational Shocks provides the same benefit muscle enhancement does when running on sand? I know it does not, because Vitality Enhancement, Motivational Shocks, and Muscle Enhancement all have the same sprint times on sand. What Muscle Enhancement does provide is an almost complete removal of the slowing effects from sandstorms. Without Muscle Enhancement, players suffer a 33% reduction in speed during sandstorms. Muscle Enhancement brings this 33% reduction to only 6%. Running through snow is about 13% faster with Muscle Enhancement than without it. The reason I'm only running to the rocky surface and not on the rocky surface is due to the fact that there is no knee-high stepping animation present when running on stone. Therefore, I can assume there is no movement penalty. When compared to only running through the snow without muscle enhancement, running through a blizzard will impose a 33% movement speed penalty, just like sandstorms. And just like sandstorms, muscle enhancement almost completely negates the movement penalty from blizzards. This equates to a 6 to 7% penalty versus 33%. Just for good measure, here is a side-by-side of Vitality Enhancement and Motivational Shocks running through blizzards. The times are the same. So far, parallels we can draw are that sprinting during a sandstorm or a blizzard will reduce your movement rate by about 33%, and that muscle enhancement will reduce either of these effects to a roughly 6% movement penalty. We've also learned that movement rate while on sand, inclines, or from vaulting or climbing is not affected by muscle enhancement. Alright, what about mud? Muscle enhancement allows you to traverse through mud about 15% faster than without it. As I mentioned a moment ago, there is a high stepping animation where the knees, at the apex of the high step, are slightly cocked outward, unlike the standard animation for sprinting, where the knees are noticeably more in line with the body. This is a very consistent indicator of scenarios where muscle enhancement is beneficial, and I have found only one exception to this. Muscle enhancement definitely negates some of the movement penalty from traversing water, as you can see. But I wanted to know if the increased speed is from walking through water, swimming through water, or if it was both. So I created split times for this. You will see total time for the entire run, swim time, and time spent slowed. Muscle enhancement allows you to swim and traverse water at a depth that produces the high knee stepping animation about 21% faster than without it. Okay, so far we've covered everything where Motivational Shocks and Vitality Enhancement have absolutely 0 impact. From now on, that will not be the case for at least one of them. We're still testing all 3 boosters, and by the end of this, you'll understand why. 3 seconds after tremors are detected, you will be smacked with a slow debuff, sapping all of your stamina. This debuff removes your ability to sprint for 10 seconds. This is the one exception for muscle enhancement. I see the knee-high stepping, but I cannot move any faster than if I didn't have the booster. You will even receive this debuff while jetpacking and are not on the ground. Motivational Shocks reduces the length of time this debuff is active from 10 seconds to 7.5 seconds, a 25% reduction in time, and it is currently the only booster that has any benefit in reducing the impact of tremors. Running through foliage, plants, bushes, flora, whatever, is most definitely faster with muscle enhancement than without it by around 22%. Wait a second, Cash. The recorded time that you're comparing muscle enhancement against is higher than what you're showing on screen for Motivational Shocks. What gives? Motivational Shocks is consistently faster than Vitality Enhancement when running the same line through foliage by 4 to 6 frames at 60 FPS. Every time. I believe this is because there is a slowing effect controlled by a radius around the plants. A very small radius. Since this is technically a debuff, it drops off faster with Motivational Shocks than without it. You would never notice this when playing the game. We're talking 1/12 of a second difference. When running through a frozen flower, Motivational Shocks beats Muscle Enhancement. Barely. Muscle Enhancement beats Vitality Enhancement. Why? Because you move faster in snow with Muscle Enhancement. I believe frozen flowers work exactly like we saw with foliage, except that the radius is big. I believe that while within this radius, the slow debuff is repeatedly applied until you escape the radius. This theory is more or less proven by diving. Muscle enhancement and vitality enhancement equalize. The debuff disappears at the same rate. Motivational Shocks removes the debuff 25% faster than with the other boosters, the same percentage we saw with tremors. The damage taken from the explosion of the frozen flower is reduced by the Vitality Enhancement booster. This is the first thing we've covered where these 3 boosters provide different resistances to the same thing. From here on out, this will be the case. The Vitality Enhancement booster provides damage reduction and does not simply provide a larger pool of health. I'll leave a link to a Reddit post by zeddypanda in the description that provides an explanation. Running through barbed wire is interesting. I don't know why you'd run through this much of it, but if you do and you have muscle enhancement, you'll move through the barbed wire about 42% faster than without it. This is very close to twice the rate of running through foliage. Being in the barbed wire for less time reduces the amount of damage you take to 50% opposed to roughly 60% with Motivational Shocks. Again, I'm comparing the runtime for muscle enhancement to vitality enhancement in the calculations. Just like with foliage, the slow debuff drops 4 to 6 frames faster than with the vitality enhancement booster. The amount of total health I lose during this run is reduced to roughly 20% with the vitality enhancement. I theorized that if I had at least muscle enhancement and vitality enhancement, this percentage would be reduced to roughly 10%. Running all 3 boosters, you can see that this is exactly what happened. I believe barbed wire functions as damage over time with the slow debuff and also damages you as you move through it. Something I covered in the Democracy Protects section of my armor video is the thorn plant. I classify it as the most dangerous hazard in the game. Let me tell you why. Running by it behaves very similarly to barbed wire regarding health and the slow debuff. Furthermore, if you didn't notice, barbed wire will rapidly drain your stamina. So does the thorn plant. When a thorn plant is shot, it will explode. There is a direct damage portion of this from the thorns that fire out in a circle as projectiles, and you will receive a bleed debuff. I've found that when around 8 meters away, you will receive the debuff, but you're unlikely to be struck by one of the projectiles. The most typical bleed debuff I've seen is from torso injuries, which has an on-screen indicator. The bleed from the thorn plant does not have this indicator, nor does it present the red halo around the screen indicating incoming damage. Well, so what, Cash? I'll just pop a stem and call it a day. Fair enough, but there is a potential issue with that. If you're wearing armor with an armor rating that is greater than 100, or if you're running the Vitality Enhancement booster, you will take no damage from the bleed. Sounds like a good thing, right? It isn't. While in this state, you will not recover stamina, and you will not be able to stim if you're at full health. Has this ever happened to you? It has to me, and now I know why. To clear it, you have to receive some damage, then you can stim. Outside of these circumstances, meaning you aren't running vitality enhancement and your armor rating is 100 or lower, you will bleed out in roughly 2 minutes from full health. Once you reach 20% remaining health, you will begin recovering your stamina as normal. The tick rate is 1 health after the first second of the debuff, followed by a period of 3 seconds where you receive no ticks, then it is 1 tick per second until you expire. I counted 123 ticks, so contrary to the Reddit post I mentioned earlier that claims we have 125 health, I'm seeing 123 health. I'm not one to nitpick, 123, 125, whatever. The difference between the two is 1.6%. The Bug Bomb, the last of the hazards. Unlike the Frozen Flower and Thorn Plant, these have no direct damage, only a damage over time effect. I spent entirely too much time looking at these. To begin, if you only take damage by running over these, it's 123 ticks. More confirmation, and I didn't just do this once. I did it 6 times. That's roughly 6 hours of data collection and editing for analysis. The manner in which the damage over time is applied to you varies by armor rating, and possibly fortified. The method employed here was to cut at every tick and change the text to the next tick number. Once the slow debuff has dropped, I took the amount of time between bug bombs and shortened it to 1 second. Therefore, every break between damage ticks from the dot are the same. This allowed me to normalize the footage to calculate DPS per armor to see how they compare. There is a major shift in dot damage at 129 armor rating. For armor rating 100 and below, you'll receive, on average, 8 ticks over 3 seconds. Each tick, I assume, is 1 health. At 129 armor rating and higher, you'll receive, on average, 5 ticks over 3 seconds. I've calculated the damage per second for 6 different armors with this debuff. The higher the armor rating, the more evenly spread out the ticks are within the 3-second windows. I haven't quantified how evenly spread out the ticks are. This is just an anecdotal observation. For the data in the spreadsheet, there is an armor with 100 armor rating and fortified that performs worse than an armor with 100 armor rating and engineering kit. Fortified on 50 armor rating performed better than 50 armor rating scout. Unfortunately, the 100 armor rating engineering kit data was collected without running around. Therefore, I had no visual indicator for when the slow debuff dropped. So, I gave it 1/4 of a second before the cut, as was typical within the pattern at the point of the cut. Technically, this amount of time can vary within my data anywhere from 13/60ths of a second to 17/60ths of a second, and I was applying a 15/60ths of a second cut. This could account for the difference between the armor with fortified and the armor without. I don't really know. All I can do is provide my findings along with any issues that could skew it. With muscle enhancement, you will move 2 meters in 2/3 of a second with this debuff. This is 42% faster than without the muscle enhancement booster, as it takes a full second to move the same distance of 2 meters. With Motivational Shocks, the debuff will clear in 2 1/4 seconds. Without Motivational Shocks, it will clear in 3 seconds, a 25% reduction in time. Motivational Shocks, if running armor that has armor rating of 100 or lower, you will suffer 6 ticks of damage instead of 8 due to the shortened time. When wearing armor rating 129 or higher, you will suffer 4 ticks of damage instead of 5, so 3/4 of a second not spent slowed and fewer ticks of damage because of it. And with Vitality Enhancement, you will suffer 0 damage from the debuff. Additionally, this debuff removes your ability to sprint. So, back to the 123 ticks of damage found in my data. I believe the 125 provided by zeddypanda in the Reddit post I referenced earlier is correct. Why? I noticed in testing the bug bomb that there is a gap of time that is abnormal for the first dot applied when coming from full health. This gap has damage indicators on the periphery of the screen that show damage is being taken, yet the health bar does not move. Remember that the thorn plant provides no indicators for damage. That being said, The first tick of damage when coming from full health seems larger than the other ticks of damage for the rest of the process. There are exactly 2 ticks that do not modify the health bar, and they occur at intervals that align with the patterns presented in the other series of ticks when progressing towards 0 health, irrespective of armor rating. There are always just the 2, and they always occur at this point. This didn't just occur once or twice, it happened all 6 times across the armors I tested against the bug bomb, and was always present in the first series of damage ticks between the first and second health bar progressions. It's a pattern, it's predictable, it's repeatable, and it aligns with data from other sources. I have no vested interest in whether our total health is 123 or 125, so it's easy to remain objective in my assessment. I'm relatively certain that 125 is the correct amount of health that we have, and not the 123 I've observed, as long as the ticks are 1 damage each. So why does the bug bomb get so much attention, Cash? Because it provides the acid debuff. It is the exact debuff for the tongue from the hunter, the spit from the bile spitter, and the radial dot from the bile titan. They are the same. Now that you understand how the bug bomb works, you know how the 3 other sources of this debuff work, with some exceptions. Unlike the bug bomb, the hunter tongue has direct damage that applies the acid debuff. The bile spitter's spit is just like the hunter's tongue, except its range is further and their ability to connect with you is pretty terrible if you aren't standing still. The bile titan has 3 parts to its range attack: direct damage from the stream, an AoE around the impact point of the stream that does explosion damage, and the acid debuff that is applied within the radius. I did have to come to an understanding of how the spew from a bile titan works when making this video. Turns out, it's pretty tough to get just the acid debuff portion of the attack. This is especially true in the fact that it is applied via area of effect, and this can cause the debuff to be reapplied, increasing the amount of time it's active, therefore making it difficult to get an accurate reading. I tested against bile and nursing spewers and saw no debuff from their attack. From what I understand, there is only direct damage and an AoE that is explosion damage. This is confirmed by looking at the Helldivers.io website for enemies. I'll leave a link to it in the description as well. To account for every effect that is happening, sometimes direct damage can sap a portion of your stamina bar. This, obviously, directly translates to more stamina recovery that is required. There is more to cover with Vitality Enhancement that will be in the next part of the video series. Muscle Enhancement doesn't do everything that I previously thought it did, and now I know very precisely what it does. Motivational Shocks is helpful, but a lot of its functionality can be circumvented through skillful play. It's difficult to specifically determine how much of a benefit Motivational Shocks provides in some circumstances, like debuffs that are applied through areas of effect. In the circumstances where it is very clear-cut, like in the case of Tremors diving through a frozen flower and the acid debuff, it's a 25% reduction in time that the debuff is active. In the case where the debuff also applies a damage over time effect, like in the case of acid, and you aren't running Vitality Enhancement, this will also reduce the total amount of damage you take per application, since the rate you receive damage remains constant and the time is shortened. If you're looking for the most optimal booster setup for fighting bugs and hunters, bile spitters, and bile titans are your primary concern, I suggest running Muscle Enhancement, Motivational Shocks, Vitality Enhancement, and Stamina Enhancement. All 4 of these will help to mitigate the slowing effects, the damage over time, and any stamina loss from attacks. I understand that this was a lot to go through, and it may be difficult to remember everything. So I made a matrix that contains all the benefits I've found for Muscle Enhancement and Motivational Shocks, as well as the benefits for Vitality Enhancement that we've covered so far. You'll find a link in the description to a Google Sheet. Hopefully it will provide more benefit to you than my Barrages video did. Thank you for taking the time to delve a bit more deeply into a few boosters with me. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. Either or both of these would help me out a lot. And with that, I'm out.